Hi, welcome to Astrology for Gain Traders. My name is Olga Morales. I've put this short video together. It's part of my OMS Planetary watch that I produce annually, which gives you an indication of all the forthcoming transits for the year ahead in terms of all planetary alignments, eclipses, all you need to know to give you an edge of understanding what to expect. And it's specifically related to a lot of W.D. Gann's work and what he was looking at. And one of the things that he was very focused on was eclipses. Basically, his novel Tunnel Through the Air starts with an eclipse and ends with an eclipse. So we need to understand when they happen and also where they're located on the Earth plane, and other things that I do teach in my advanced course if you're interested in learning a lot more about eclipses. But let's get started on this one, because next year on the 21st of August 2017 there's going to be a total solar eclipse over nearly actually all the United States. So they haven't had one totally over that whole part from one end to the other for a while. So this is going to be very significant. See, eclipses highlight areas on the globe, and that usually puts that area, that country, in the spotlight. So this is going to be important for the United States. And so let's get started. If we look at the actual chart, on the horoscope, I've cast it for New York City. You can see that the eclipse will be overhead, just like you see on the map here. So you can see the eclipse overhead, or it's actually more in the center part of the United States. New York is over here. So you can see there's a slight difference between the midheaven and where the actual eclipse is. Okay, so the closer it is, you see the sun to this midheaven, that means it's directly overhead, so you'll be totally under the pathway at that time and you'll have a total eclipse there. So you can see how there's a focus. We've got obviously the nodes are close by in Leo, and Mars is also in Leo, so there's pretty much a stellium, a lot of focus in Leo, which is a fire sign, and Mercury will be in Gemini. That's a significant degree, as you'll see as we get on. Saturn will be trine, also in a fire sign, and Uranus would be in a wide trine around, also in a fire sign. So there's a lot of energy with this eclipse. So let's have a look at, as I mentioned earlier, W.D.'s novel called Tunnel Through the Air, which is his coded novel, actually ends with an eclipse on the 31st of August 1932, which was visible over the United States as well, especially over New York. But you can see that the center line's a lot higher than the one that they're having next year. It was more in this zone here. Okay, but still in the same area of visibility. So that's significant in itself. So what I've done here, there's a pattern with eclipses that every 54 years they actually return to the same place or similar place on the Earth plane. And this is a way of forecasting for countries as well, by looking back every 54 years. So what I've done here, I've plotted the last three. So you can see 1 would be 1918, 2 would be 1964, and 3 is a 2017, which is really in that center part that they'll be seeing. So this is significant for mundane forecasting. If you want to know more, I recommend Bill Meridian's book on eclipse paths. He does a great job explaining a lot of how to do this, but it's in terms of looking back, like W.D. Gann tells you to do. This is really an important part of forecasting. So let's have a look. 54 years ago, just to show you how that looks, you can see the eclipse over the United States again, a little bit higher the center line that we're going to see at next year, but still covering the partial eclipses all visible in the United States. Okay, now what happened in 1963. Some of you may have been born in that day. You know that's 54, so you'd be 54. Well, one of the most important things that happened was JFK was assassinated. Now, this is what got my interest, because there's so much, what's the word? It's not a coincidence, but cosmic connections between what happened to JFK and the eclipse that's happening in 2017. So you can see that what I've done here, the actual eclipse that I just showed you on this map was actually on the 20th of July 1963. What I've done is I've cast a fidelis, because you can see on this chart that the planet Uranus, which causes a lot of unexpected things to happen, goes right through Texas in there. Okay, so when you actually locate it for Dallas, Texas, you can see that it's pretty much right on the midheaven for that location. So the midheaven means the meridian. So if you're looking straight above, looking up into the heavens above you, that's that point there. Okay, it's like the midday point where the sun is over your head, and that's supposed to symbolize that point, that location of where you are. So it's very significant for mundane forecasting. But then, how does it become personal for the president? How did this become personal for JFK? That's when you want to, because we have eclipses all the time, but are they going to affect us on a personal manner? We need to see how that eclipse actually triggers something in our natal chart. So this is where it became very significant, looking at JFK chart, and I get sort of goosebumps when I look at it. So what happened is this eclipse on the 20th of July 1963 was actually exactly conjunct JFK's Saturn, which is at 27 of Cancer, and like only 4 degrees from his midheaven. The node was there. So this eclipse was very much to do with him on a personal level. Remember, the MC is our status, our career, our authority. It represents the president, the authority of the government in a mundane chart. So the fact that it hit him, if you symbolically could think of that as our head, or at the top of us, where we reach the highest, that in essence it's on his Saturn natally, which represents challenges, restrictions, and also authority. But eclipses can actually highlight you, put you in the spotlight, but they also bring an element of they can bring you ill things. Anciently they were bad omens, but what they do is they put you in the spotlight basically, and they can bring you down depending on what natal planet they're actually highlighting, if they're triggering any planet in your chart. So JFK actually said this only 7 days before he was assassinated. There's a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman and child. Before I leave this high and noble office, I intend to expose this plot. So, he obviously had ideas or knew things that weren't meant to be spoken about. Now let's have a look at what it looks like on 90-degree dial. Remember, the 90-degree dial just shows hard aspects, and you can see that the eclipse was on his Saturn, actually on his part of fortune too. But it comes to some significant midpoints here, and one of them is actually his moon and sun midpoint, which is very personal. This is what I was saying before. How personal are these eclipses to your charts? And if they are very personal, well, they'll have a high impact on your life, especially someone in a position of authority. They're actually affected more by eclipses. And if you look at royal families, people in authority often are born or die around eclipses, because it's just something that it's like a cosmic DNA line to be born on these eclipses. Okay, so let's have a look at also when he was then assassinated, what was happening. It's interesting that the nodes, the transiting nodes around the actual assassination were opposite to his natal nodes. Okay, so there was still a direct connection, because remember, the nodes are to do with our karmic destiny, and often the nodes trigger important events. They're like a karmic clock ticking away around our chart, and then basically it's like a cosmic clock for us, a karmic clock. So you can see this line up here. His natal nodes, the transiting nodes across the dial, his midheaven. The sun was actually on that day connected to his midheaven. The eclipse midheaven. But also in his natal chart, you can see it comes to the midpoint of his Sun and Mars, which is quite hostile and aggressive. His Pluto MC, which is the death point, and Saturn and Chiron, which is the wounding and the restriction. And you can see that the eclipse is right on his Saturn there. So this is the pattern. There's more in this chart, but I'm not going to go too much more into it. So now, I just want to point out something about which US chart to use. I know I get a bit of grief from other astrologers about this, but anyway, I'm using the Gemini rising chart for the United States because W.D. Gann was using it, and he was using it obviously in Tunnel Through the Air, because he actually says it. So from page 326, I'm quoting, "We need the man of the hour, and in times past the United States has always produced that man. I'm a great believer in the Bible. I have read the predictions made by Colonel Robert Gordon ever since he was a very young man. Just what is happening now he predicted years ago. He has made some remarkable inventions, was born under the sign which astrologers call the ascendant of the United States, the sign Gemini, ruled by Mercury, the messenger of the gods." Now in the Gemini rising chart, there's Uranus's rising was symbolic of the American independence between 7 and 9 degrees of Gemini. If we look at the actual chart, this is the chart that WD was using. It's the 4th of July 1776 at 2:15 a.m., which is in the morning, and people say, well, that doesn't make sense. But in a way, it's like an electional chart representing the independence of the country with Uranus rising. And it sort of makes sense that they've got the actual Venus, Jupiter and Sun, which is very benefic. Remember, the Sun was right on the fixed star of Sirius, which is the most elevated star, honoured star in Egyptian for the Egyptians. And so the forefathers, the Masonic forefathers of America, chose that day to have that link. Okay, so having all these, the best sort of combination in that second house of finance and money for the country makes sense in a way for that electional chart. So this chart is amazing when you look at it, and Gemini rising is significant. W.D. Gann was a Gemini, so it's interesting in that respect. And what did I want to mention now? What we have to look at is the Mars square Neptune is what I've said called the USA's Achilles heel. Now in cosmobiology, we know the Mars Neptune, Eberton gives the interpretation as activity, paralyzed, weakness, sickness and failures. So it's a very weak and debilitating combination, a square. So anything that, if you look back at these two, you'll see that they're often that degree between 20 and 22 of the mutable signs is a very significant degree for the United States on many levels if you look back. Okay, and I look at that in my transit report, so you get more detail on what has happened in the past and the dates that they will be triggered in the future. So why am I focusing on that? I'm focusing on that because the new president-elect at the moment, Donald Trump, is also a Gemini. But the amazing thing is that his North Node and Sun are actually, these two here, actually conjunct the United States Mars. Okay, this Mars is a planet of war. aggression, going forward, leadership. Okay, his whole sun, node, and moon, because he was born on the full moon, are all linked to that Mars. Okay, so he fits in the first and seventh house of the United States using the Gemini rising chart. The other amazing thing is that his prenatal eclipse was on the 30th of May, only 2 weeks before, on 1946, and it was at 8 degrees of Gemini, exactly conjunct the United States ascendant at Uranus. So remember, the Uranus is the planet of revolution, and the fact that his prenatal eclipse is on that degree, you can see what's happening. He is the bringer of the revolution in the United States. So it's amazing how this is playing out at the moment. How's it going to go? Well, let's continue. If we put it on the 90-degree dial, what I've done, I've got American independence in the centre. The second wheel is Donald Trump's chart, and the third wheel is when he was elected on the 9th of November as the 45th president. Now, you can see when we do this that remember, the Mars-Neptune is the Achilles heel of the United States. But not only that, across the dial, which is the 8th harmonic, it's actually linked in with the nodes of the United States. So that's the karmic destiny of the nation. And Trump, all his combination of his sun, moon, and the nodes all link in with this weak point of the United States and the destiny of the nation, which is just mind-blowing. When I look at it, I just think, wow, this is absolutely amazing. So, but at the time when he was elected, that was a Chiron right out at this degree, which is the wounding, so there's a lot of symbolism happening in this. I won't go into too much more for this presentation, but looking at the eclipse for him personally, as I showed you for JFK, this eclipse for Donald Trump is quite dangerous. It actually highlights, if you have a look where it is, it's the actual eclipse is at 28 degrees of Leo. His rising sign is 2959, which is right on the royal star, fixed star Regulus, the king, and his natal Mars. Okay, so he's going to have this eclipse on his ascendant, his natal Mars, but at the same time, Saturn is going to be triggering his moon and node, his south node, the karmic past, the also past wounds, and across the dial from his sun. So you can see how this is a very personal eclipse for him. This is what I'm trying to get across to you. It's not, and because we've got these hard sort of alignments, what he has in a way that is a good thing is that he's just had his Jupiter return, which is the 12-year cycle. Okay, but apart from that, he's got these very difficult combinations happening here. Another significant thing, if you look at the difference between JFK and Donald Trump, they're actually born 29 years apart, which is absolutely amazing because their Saturn is almost at the same degree. You can see that Donald Trump's Jupiter is only 2 degrees away from JFK's ascendant. Both Geminis, okay, and there's a lot of link in here, similarities in terms of their horoscopes. Now, Donald Trump and the solar eclipse, just to show you on the 90-degree dial, again, you can see that the Saturn MC of the eclipse is on his sun and nodes. You can see the eclipse actually on his ascendant, part of fortune, and Mars. That's dangerous, okay? Cross the dial for him, it's right on his Chiron, which is the wound, and also between the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, which is the sickness and debilitated type of depression midpoint. So let's have a look at the next slide. That's just reinforcing that again. You can see the lineup. I think I've doubled that up, sorry. But another important thing is that for the time when of the inauguration on January 20th, 2017, Donald Trump's having some really difficult aspects, and this difficult pattern suggests a hard struggle to meet all demands and to master situations required of a president. The Mars Saturn is a death midpoint, dangerous for him. This configuration will also happen again in October. So you can see how, again, there's going to be, Saturn will be on his moon node across the dial from his sun, but also at the same time Mars is at 24 Pisces. So there's, again, these two will be square, triggering his important nodal axis and sun and moon, which is pretty much the pivot of his chart. That's harmful, destructive energy, inhibited or destroyed vitality. So this is probably when the reality hits of what he has to do to be a president. And if this is symbolic of his presidency, you can see the struggles that he will be experiencing. And here it is on the 90-degree dial. You can see the Mars, Saturn and Chiron, the wounds, coming to his sun and nodes and across the dial to some important points in his chart. Now, the other thing, another important transit will be October 11th, 2017, when Mars will be exactly square, Mars here would be exactly square Saturn, and that again will be highlighting his chart, and also the American independence, Mars Neptune. Okay, remember I said that's the Achilles heel. So this is how he links in with the United States. So it's like if you're looking at a family and you're doing synastry, how do people in your family all line up? You're looking for the same degrees and how everyone gets triggered at the same time. Well, this is how Donald Trump and the United States are all linked in. And it's in this mutable area between 20 degrees to 23, 24 of the mutable signs is very important for both United States and Donald Trump. And you can see how Saturn's going to be and Mars are going to be in that area during the year. So very significant. This is what it looks like on the 90-degree dial for October 11. You can see the Mars Saturn over here, triggering United States. Mars Neptune across the dial is the karmic destiny of the country. Okay, so thank you for listening. That was like just me going quickly through some of my slides. If you want to know more, I produce Om's Planetary Watch, as I said from earlier, and that's the link on from my website. And I go into a lot more detail, and we go into a lot of Gann's way of analysing the year ahead. We'll look at his financial timetable, what cycle we're in an economic way, and how that Mars Neptune and Donald Trump's chart looks like for the rest of the next year and what we can anticipate. So thank you for listening.